All right, I call to order this meeting of the Gladstone Planning Commission for Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. It's 6:30 p.m. We are meeting online via the Zoom format, and this meeting is being recorded. Tammy Bannock, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Langston,
Present.
Commissioner Natalie Smith,
Present.
Commissioner Poole, Commissioner Pat Smith,
Here.
Chair Milch.
Present. Pat, we can't see your camera. Are you going to be on by phone?
There I
you go.
am.
All right.
I was trying to brighten your day somewhat, but I'll go ahead and turn it on.
Thank you. So we have basically 3 items on the agenda tonight. Our consent agenda, which involves approval of the minutes of our December meeting. We won't have a verbal report from the planner. She will not be here tonight, but we do have a written report included in our agenda, and we can approve that and adopt it next month. And then we have the main focus of our meeting tonight is the presentation from Deb Myhoff regarding the community engagement strategy for our broadly connected housing concerns. And then we'll spend some time looking at a work plan for 2021. So have commission members had a chance to look at the minutes of the December meeting, and are there any additions or corrections to be made?
I have none.
I don't have any changes either.
Okay, I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes of our December 15, 2020 meeting.
I'll
I
make a
move that we
motion
accept-
to approve the minutes for our minutes from the 2020 meeting.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Langston. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
And seconded by Commissioner Pat Smith. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The minutes are approved. So for a little over 2 years now, we have been talking about the housing needs in Gladstone. We formed a committee that looked at possible code amendments and we had a code audit, and we looked at possible changes there. And even before we talked about housing, we had a downtown revitalization committee that worked on plans for that and made some recommendations for code changes. And out of all those meetings together, we've tried to involve the public as much as possible, but we know when it comes down to finally making some of those changes, we really need a good strategy for community engagement. So we have engaged Deb Myhoff, am I saying that correctly? To help us with that tonight. And staff, would you like to introduce Deb or say anything more about that before we go directly to her?
Thank you, Chair Milch. We are very excited. A lot of work has been done the past few years, including the Planning Commission. And so what I'd like to do is introduce John Southgate, who has helped Gladstone all along the way. And then he will introduce Deb Myhoff with her strategic engagement strategy. So John, do you want to go ahead?
I can be very brief. Thank you, Jackie and Chair Milch. Chair Milch identified the main drivers of why we're here tonight. We have the downtown revitalization strategy, which the council adopted in 2017. We have the housing code audit, which the council, with the Planning Commission's blessing and involvement, the housing code audit was acknowledged by the council last year, or 2019, 2 years ago now. There was also HB 2001 state legislation, which modifies how cities within the metro boundary regulates its housing ordinances. We have all these policy documents in place, but we, in a way you might say, we haven't done anything yet, not until we actually adopt new code. So we're about to embark on that. But before we started that, one of the things that our Housing Code Audit Advisory Committee advocated for strongly was to make sure that we do this in a manner that really engages the public beyond just the usual sort of processes that we're prone to follow. And so DLCD, which they couldn't be here tonight, but they provided a grant to the city, both for the housing needs analysis, which you reviewed and authorized or blessed in December, and then this community engagement strategy. This strategy is, right now, it's a document on paper, and Deb Myhoff has done a fantastic job on it. I mean, I reviewed the draft. It's one of the few times I've actually read through a document, I didn't even need my red pen. But that document will loom large in the future, near term, as you, as the city council, as we embark on actually doing the code changes to enact the downtown strategy, the housing code audit, and HB 2001. So this is a very important part of this. This isn't an actual code change, but this is guidance to how we really engage a broad public engagement in this effort. With that, unless there's any front-end questions, I'd like to turn it over to Deb. Deb Myhoff.
Pat, do you have a question?
I do have a question.
Okay.
As questions arise, would you prefer we ask them at that time or hold them until the presentations are done?
From my perspective, it'd be great if you could hold them to the end.
It's a deal.
Thank you. Thank you for asking. Hi, good evening, commissioners. Deb Myhoff with Communitas. Really excited to talk to you about the work I did for you, and just sort of at a real high level, I'll go over what's in the strategy document. But as John and Jackie have mentioned, you know, this is sort of building on many prior efforts and really thinking forward to implementation of the downtown revitalization plan and then the new middle housing zoning that's needed. And then also, of course, on the tail of the housing needs analysis, really highlighting some of your housing needs and where folks are having a tough time finding housing choice in Gladstone. So thinking about all that, I embarked upon some research to just better understand what community engagement went into those prior efforts, what a typical process looks like in the city. And then I talked to quite a few of you and talked to the Housing Code Audit Committee that was formed a couple years ago, just to understand exactly when they said they really thought this should be a robust community engagement process, what that means. And then I talked to other folks that do outreach and who have been reaching out to typically underrepresented populations to better understand what they might need to be more in the fold of public process and policy making. And so there's a summary of that in the appendix of the memo. And then you'll see in the document, I also dug a bit into your policy documents to see what sort of framework you have for, you know, what you as a city are requiring yourselves to do for process. And some of it's older in your comp plan. Even the language, as you can tell, is citizen involvement. That's not language we typically use. We often say community involvement now. And then, however, the council did pass a resolution over the summer regarding racial equity that I think really helps frame the conversation as well. So, you know, and wanting to, sorry, I will try to get to that language because I thought it was really good, but sort of, you know, the council declaring the city of Gladstone will engage in listening and learning opportunities with communities of color to learn their experiences to better help in improving policies and practices. And that's certainly what we're talking about here. Land use policies and practices are at bear here. So with all of those thoughts pulled together and just sort of my knowledge of the community and doing this sort of work and kind of understanding this kind of work that's being done in the region, I've laid out sort of the why, who, how, and what outline for community engagement. It's a little bit tricky, so I'll just tell you, we can get into some of the details, but it is a little bit tricky. You don't have a full project scoped out for the code amendments yet with a team on board. So I tried to give them a really good framework to work from, but there'll be some decisions to make about how to really approach it and apply this strategy with the code refinement work. So it should work fine. I'm a planner. I do code work. I kind of get the sort of engagement needs that are there, but then also really understand the housing choice issues you have in the city. So I've laid out, just to sort of walk you through the document just a little bit here, the why, purpose, and goals. I just mentioned that sort of policy foundation, as well as the findings from the research and conversations with others. The who, that's the list of sort of key stakeholders that need to be thought about and planned for and planned with. So this section we might come back to. I think it'd be really helpful to hear from you all if I've missed someone. I gathered these types of ideas and stakeholders through the conversations with other folks that are working in Gladstone. So it'd be good to know if we've missed a key stakeholder in there, and make sure we get them on the list. And then sort of the decision-making framework sort of outlines some roles and responsibilities. Those can get solidified as you begin the rezoning project, or the zoning code project, sorry. And then I also took a stab, this is the tricky part, I took a stab at what I think the planning phases are for this project. It's an educated guess, but this will be refined. That's the win. But generally how this sort of code project goes, how you might shape a project. And so then I use that information. Sorry, one more thing. I always put in these sorts of strategies as some sort of opportunity and framework for how to evaluate yourself along the way, so you're not waiting to the end of the project before you realize that you haven't connected with all the people you need to really connect with and people who'll be impacted by your decisions. So somewhere early on, you kind of decide what it is that's really important for us for community outreach and how you're going to measure that. And then you need to track, you and the team will need to track sort of who's participating, and you might have to rejigger sort of what your activities are and how you're going about things if it's not working, because that happens sometimes. You think you have a really great idea and a way to connect with high school students, for instance, and you realize they're not responding, and you're going to have to change direction so you can make sure that voice gets included. So that sort of framework is plugged in there. And then I've outlined sort of what I think are probably the best options for you all in an engagement program. And again, this will be once you sort of launch the code project, really dialing down the details of each of these types of program activities, but really thinking about the different types of stakeholders, and really importantly, centering those people who do not have stable, secure housing or really good housing choices. They're staying in their current house, whether they own it or rent it because they don't have a choice about where else to go and they'd like to stay in the city of Gladstone. So really trying to understand those folks who are seeking housing, needing housing, from your housing needs analysis, from research and conversation, and from population projections, and focusing your conversations on that, because that's who's going to be occupying this housing in the future. And thinking about what sort of community that looks like with a lot of housing choice, and trying to connect with people who you would like to stay in Gladstone. So that's the involvement program, sort of lining that out with a pretty significant emphasis on connecting with those folks who need housing most, or who don't currently have sort of stable, secure housing. And affordable, of course, is a big part of that. And then also, you have some, sorry, I did skip over, one of your major stakeholder groups are your internal stakeholders. So other departments, infrastructure bureaus that would need to, departments that would need to understand where housing might go, to make sure that the water system and the sanitary sewer system match up with that, and the transportation system is ready to go, and projects, any sort of additional improvements or upgrades that need to be made are done in the right sequence. So that all works together. So they're also part of that conversation. And that's it. I think it would, as I mentioned, it would be helpful to hear your thoughts about the stakeholder list for sure. And if I missed anyone obvious or anything obvious, or any great public engagement tool you were expecting to see but don't see here, it'd be great to get feedback.
I'll jump in real quick and note that we don't have to get it perfect tonight.
Yep.
The next step, Jackie asked me to come and join the city council retreat this Friday and Saturday. I'll be there on Saturday morning, and we're going to talk about housing. And the intention is to issue an RFP probably in the next month or so to find a consulting team of planners and public, engagement specialists to undertake this process over the next X months. And of course, the Planning Commission will be very involved in that. There'll probably be regular check-ins with you. But so the consultant team will be instructed, they'll be instructed to read Deb's report, and they may say, oh, Deb missed something here, or we really like this idea of Deb's and we're going to take it further. So it's not like we got to get it perfect tonight and then we're never going to talk about it again. I think Deb alluded to this. It's going to be something kind of fluid and involved, and we'll try something, like the high school kids, and we don't get much response. My idea is to go down to the malt shop. That's where I used to hang out. But if that doesn't work, we'll try something else. So I don't feel like, boy, we got to get it all figured out tonight. That said, I appreciate Deb's invitation. I agree. If there are obvious groups, stakeholder organizations, whatever, that, gosh, hey, Deb, you should include this group. Now's a great time to convey that.
Well, Deb, I have to say, this is a really good time for you to be coming to us with a plan like this, because Gladstone for the last couple of years has been working with the county on a new library project. And
Yep.
There was a similar emphasis on outreach and community involvement there, in particular reaching out to underserved communities and those we don't usually hear from. And we've been talking about libraries for years in this town, and have had open houses and other things, but haven't done the quality of outreach that the county officials and professionals that were engaged for this project have done. So many of us in the city have now seen how community engagement can be done in a more effective way than we've been accustomed to in the past. And it's very exciting to see that emphasis. When we talk about housing needs, you want us to hear from the people who need housing, not the people who are comfortably, in their single family homes now and want to keep everybody else away. We want to hear from the folks who can't find a home here or hope to in the future and are really struggling, and identify those needs. So you have, hit the nail on the head as far as who we need to be hearing from. And I'm very pleased with that. One question I had, you spoke in terms of the collective you as, you will be doing this, and you are not talking to us, the Planning Commission. As John indicated, we would be hiring consultants to really do that process. They'll keep us informed along the way, but we won't be the ones out there trying to set up these engagements and other activities.
Though I think that's true, Commissioner, though I would say any consultant team who was met with a planning commission that was interested in helping with that sort of work would gladly work them into the process.
Okay. All right. Are there other commissioners who have questions? John, did you want to say something else? You need to unmute.
Well, I just wanted to note, first of all, Deb, I think you talked to the folks involved in the library outreach effort and took some of their ideas. And then also, I don't know if now's a good time, Jackie, you and I talked earlier today about more diverse outreach, and I know you spoke with the county folks, and I don't know if you want to let us know what you heard from them.
You're muted, Jackie.
I think the timing is optimum because Clackamas County is also going through a process, what's called an environmental scan. And in talking with them, they're going to have the Research Justice Institute help them with a multi-year plan that will engage the Coalition of Communities of Color, and it will identify some target areas in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I think working with Clackamas County as we have this strategy will be very beneficial and provide us some of that input that we're looking for.
Could I interrupt for just a moment? This is for Tammy Bannock. Pat Smith is having internet issues and connectivity issues. I don't know if you can reach out to him and help him get reconnected.
Yeah, I saw that he went offline and I was waiting for him to try to reconnect. I will try to email him. He should just be able to click back on that link. So,
Yeah, no, I just thought, I'm sorry to interject. Go ahead.
So thanks, that lets us know where he is.
Yep. He sent me a text.
Okay.
all right, we'll send it back to him.
Commissioner Langston, did you have any questions or comments about the process?
No, I thought it was well put together, and I'm excited to see what it can drum up for sure.
On the schedule, part of these potential code changes are things that are coming out of state level legislation, going back not just to 2019 to the House Bill 2001, but even before that, Senate Bill 1051, I think, had some things that will affect us that we need to try to get into our code. And there is a process by which some model codes are going to be provided and some deadlines depending on the size of the community and other factors related to infrastructure, criteria and constraints. Does the schedule that you prepared sort of parallel that to some extent? Are we going to get ahead of ourselves or get behind ourselves, do you think? Or did you consider that in your plans?
I did just a little bit, but it's sometime, gosh, Jackie or John might know, it's sometime in 2022 that the House Bill 2001 needs to, you need to have code adopted.
I think we're ahead of that, Deb. I remember this came up before. That's a good point. And I think it's like the end of 2022. So
I think it is too. I don't think it's mid-year. I think it's the end. But yeah, I sort of assumed generally like a 12-month-ish process that could be tightened up or lengthened. Frankly, the one thing I didn't mention was, the impacts of COVID, the pandemic, and physical distancing. There's a lot of this sort of outreach that actually is way more accessible to people virtually. There's also a lot of outreach that is not at all accessible to some communities. You can't connect. Like your commissioner who's having troubles getting back on. So there are some tricks there. I tried in here to at least point out those activities that are, well done either way. But, if you could wait for major engagement just a little bit longer, we might be able to do some of the more in-person activities, or, there might be more events, but I think that's, I wouldn't wait around a long time for that. I think you're going to have to press on.
I know that in the library process, much of that was able to happen before COVID started. And it was those in-person gatherings where we sat around tables together or, use the dots on the wall and some of that stuff. You really feel like you're involved when you're doing that. And then to see professionals take that input and come back with something that's really, demonstrates that they've listened to you, that's a helpful experience. It's pretty passive to watch a meeting on Zoom or a webinar or something, but so I think that's a good suggestion, and I think we'll try to, hopefully we'll be able to get that kind of in-person involvement before too long.
And when I talked to the library park staff, one of the bigger impacts they had were the schools being closed, and especially the Children and Family Service Center. Like, that is really a really great place to connect with all sorts of different people And many of those folks I would put in the needed housing category. So I think they were grateful they were able to get a lot of that outreach done before the pandemic, but we're sort of struggling to figure out how to connect with a lot of those people now.
All right. Commissioner Smith, you missed a little bit of the discussion while you were offline, but did you have some questions yourself from Deb's presentation?
Well, I don't know so much about Deb's presentation tonight, but about the overall housing in Gladstone. I'm wondering if there's anything in this that has a
You're breaking up a little.
You might try turning off your video to strengthen your signal.
We lost him again.
Ugh.
Does this Zoom call have just a regular call-in number with the password? And so instead of being on the Zoom call, it could at least be on the telephone?
Yes, it does. And I emailed that information to Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Tammy, for your help.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Deb, you were working on the same, you were helping with the library task force, were you not?
No.
Oh, I thought you were.
Nope. I don't know who that is. I'm trying to think who that might be. No.
You've been confused with someone that was, there's someone that works on that from that company that looks just like you.
Oh.
She's very young and attractive, if that helps.
That's
Yeah,
right.
there you go.
And super smart looking.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Pat, I'm sorry, you got cut off. Just you were asking about housing. You said, "Is there a?" and then we couldn't hear you after that.
I'm sorry, I'm apparently having some network issues. I apologize. I wondered if there's anything in our housing plan that designates ownership versus renting in any kind of a ratio.
I'll jump in, Chair Melch, if that's okay.
Okay.
I know that the housing needs analysis, which you reviewed last month, did, based on historical trends, projected what the mix of ownership versus rental. I'm pretty sure that it assumed that single family will continue to be predominantly, a majority will be ownership versus rental. Of course, multifamily, you're going to have more rental apartments. As you may know, condominiums are extremely difficult right now to finance. So I think that's the rule of thumb. I could dig up if you wanted in fact, while we talk, I could look at the projections for both single family and multifamily, the ownership versus rental percentage. The outreach piece, I don't know, Deb, I don't think it discriminates between owners versus renters, tries to reach all.
Yeah, it doesn't, though. I did point out, and I think I got it from the H&A. I mean, there are homeowners in Gladstone who are cost burdened, whose housing, they live on fixed incomes and their housing is really expensive to maintain. And they certainly need to be considered in this, and think about what the future for them is and whether the zoning code can help alleviate some of that.
Well, Mr. Southgate, it seems to me that you may have been the person that mentioned it, but in one of these presentations in the recent past, it was mentioned that the average rental payment in Gladstone is higher than the average mortgage payment.
Boy, I don't remember. That's a data point. I think I'll look up the H&A and maybe Jackie, I'll get this information to you to share with the members. But one thing I do know is that I think for both rental and ownership, Gladstone is rent burdened, or even in case of rental, severely rent burdened, meaning the percentage of people who pay more than 50% of their monthly income gross on their housing costs is, I want to say it's 30% or more. So I'd say Gladstone probably has been hit harder than a lot of jurisdictions in this region. This whole region's been hit hard. Gladstone's been hit particularly hard. And I remember early on in the housing code audit process, the point was made, people your age and my age, okay, we bought our house a long time ago, but your kids, they're going to have to live out in Estacada or whatever. They're not going to be able to afford to live in Gladstone. So that's one of the reasons for, big picture, why we need to increase housing choice is to give people the option of staying in Gladstone.
Okay. Did any of my colleagues remember that statement at all, or did I just sort of maybe dream it?
No, I remember it. I just don't remember who said it.
Okay.
I remember it as well.
It
It
makes
has
sense
to be in the H&A.
for the reasons that John gave. A lot of the homeowners have owned their homes long enough that their payments are lower than what rent is. We had a daughter who was living with us, got a condo and over in Happy Valley, and between her homeowner's fees and her mortgage and interest payments, it's less than $900. You couldn't rent an apartment somewhere for that, for the amenities and things that she's getting. So it makes perfect sense that would be the case. And I always marvel when I go back and look at our comprehensive plan from the 1970s and see the statements of expression of concern for equity for people, for both renters and owners. There's a statement in there that says, I always liked this section. The basic tenet of a good neighborhood is maintaining a quiet, safe, and pleasant atmosphere within reasonable distance to schools, parks, recreation facilities, and local retail shopping. If there are sectors within the city which do not meet these criteria and therefore are not suitable for single-family development, this lack of neighborhood quality should also prohibit the construction of multifamily units or mobile home parks within the same area. Not only should multifamily housing be located in a quality environment, which has been the domain of single-family homes, but the renter should also be provided with a choice in size, density, design, and amenities. So more than 40 years ago, the good folks of Gladstone who put this plan together were aware that we can't treat renters as second-class citizens. We have to provide housing that meets the needs of all people. And rent may just be some people's choice of how they finance, if they want to have the freedom to move quickly and relocate. Clearly there's a need for a balance of both types of housing.
I'm clearly not anti-renter. I did a little memory jogging before I brought this up, and I've lived in 8 different rental places in my life, but I've also owned a home for a number of years. And I know, there's that transition in life. You just get out of school or move out from your parents, and the idea that you're going to buy a house right away is just not true. And often they don't even know where they want to live, or at least I certainly didn't. But there's something about ownership of where you live that anybody that's in financial planning will tell you that's the first step onto the ladder for some kind of financial success in life.
Right.
It's almost everybody's largest personal asset on their balance sheet. Also kind of ties you to your community a little more permanence than renting does. And renting's fine. I have nothing against renters at all, but maintaining some kind of a balance. And I think it also came out in one of these meetings earlier on that we also have a higher percentage of renters in Gladstone than we do in most of our neighboring communities.
Yeah, I think except Wilsonville. Wilsonville had more than we do. But yes, I think a little higher than the county average.
Right. And the other thing I wanted to ask about was where are we on ever doing anything about our ADU size, which seems to be I think we're still at 400 square feet in Gladstone. That seems to be an easy ball to get rolling here. Yeah,
and it's all part of the the same code changes. I mentioned earlier that I had an email from Joy regarding a citizen in Gladstone, a homeowner who wanted to do, I think they wanted to do two ADUs in a duplex. And she discovered from somebody in the state that the law that was passed in, I think, 2017, that's the Senate Bill 1051, allows, I think it's one ADU per dwelling rather than per building. And she said, if, I'll read her words exactly because I don't want to misquote her. But she said, if I see a building permit for this situation, I would have to approve it, citing the ORS, or it would open Gladstone up to a potential lawsuit. So if there are recommended code changes coming down from the state, even though we haven't adopted them yet, I think Joy is going to be aware that we can't be so restrictive in what we do that we're going to prevent people from doing something, otherwise city could get in some trouble. I don't know if the size restrictions are one of those that would fall in that same category. But that is, it's just a matter of whether we should do this piecemeal and say, okay, let's take care of ADUs now, and then we will look at some of the other zoning later, or whether we should try to group it all together with the middle housing that's also part of the code changes that are coming up. But I agree, we've spent a lot of time on it and looked at some codes from other cities and found some other good interpretive material produced by cities that let people know what the ADU rules are in very simple language. And having something like that would really help the homeowners who want to go in that direction.
Chair Mills, that is actually on your agenda tonight to discuss after this presentation. I was going to get direction from the Planning Commission on whether or not they wanted to go ahead and start the ADU process, or do you want to do it as part of this broader package that we're working on? So that's, when we talk about your work plan, that's the guidance I'm looking from with the Planning Commission tonight.
Okay, we'll get to that as our next agenda item then, as we develop a work plan. Commissioner Natalie Smith, did you have any other questions for Deb?
The one thing that stands in the back of my mind that I want to bring to the table so that we can know best how to address it is when we talk to the community about providing more housing. Some of the people you talk to, the first thing on their mind is going to be, well, what about parking? So I wanted to bring that up because you'll hear that a lot probably when you talk to some of our citizens. Well, if you're going to build this, whatever, and more housing, where are people going to park? So.
And I know that, yeah, one of the things we're looking at is not just types of housing or housing options, but we're also looking at the things in our code that are barriers to the construction of housing that make it financially unfeasible to do something. And
Right.
John, you're the one who's talked to some developers and others, and parking requirements and minimum parking requirements are one of those things that experts say have an impact on the ability to build and construct housing that will meet the needs and still be affordable and will fit on the lots the land that we have available. So we need to be prepared to talk about that. That needs to be part of the community engagement and to see whether it's feasible for us to have, at least in portions of the city, some different rules on parking than what we've had in the past. We have property owners who are sitting on developable land and have been sitting on it for years waiting for some of these changes to happen because they think that a little bit of tweak in the code could make it possible to provide more.
Chair Milch, I just want to say you captured exactly what I was trying to convey. I don't want there to be any barriers, and I know that could potentially be one. So I'm sure you guys have I'm sure you have the ability to come up with a way to approach that. that will make them focus on the task at hand as opposed to worrying about something that they shouldn't worry about and be
Well,
able to
and
move
part of
forward.
that comes from data-driven information that comes out from other communities where they look at the average number of people who occupy ADUs or who occupy apartments and the proximity to transit to give people an option to have a place that doesn't have parking if they intend to use more transit, and that kind of fact-based information is helpful. But community engagement process is more about listening to people than telling people things. So you have to listen and hear those concerns and make sure that people feel they're heard. Mr. Southgate, this is an issue I think that, you know, particularly with regard to the downtown revitalization, that was one of the more controversial recommendations coming out of that process. But you're the one who's talked more to some of the property owners and business owners and potential developers. Do you have any more insight to add on that particular issue?
Well, just to echo what I've shared before, when I first started working for the city, boy, 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, whenever it's been, the first thing that Jackie asked me to do was to talk to developers, both of affordable housing as well as market rate, and as well as you say, with property owners. And I came back with a consistent message of real interest of if you could align your code with your goals of a more revitalized downtown with, I would say, medium density, 3 or 4 stories, not high rise, and with a reasonable parking requirement. And the point of the process is to figure out what is the sweet spot, balancing financial feasibility of new development with the need to provide for a reasonable number of cars per unit. And that's going to be the challenge. And I know there'll be some people on one extreme who are worried that there's not enough parking. Others are concerned that, gosh, you're blowing out the cost of housing so much that nothing can get built. And so our job, our planning consultant firm's job, working with you and the city council and Jackie and me, is to try to find that sweet spot. But I've seen it work. I mean, I could go on for the next hour talking about parking and its impact on. Maybe I'll just leave it with this thought. Someone said that you've heard of the famous Frank Lloyd Wright dictum that form follows function, but the real dictum should be form follows parking. So it was a little bit sarcastic, but
I like it.
We got to find the right balance, and I really believe we will. I think there's a general alignment of Gladstone moving forward, respecting the variety of voices that want to influence this thing. But I'm really bullish that Gladstone is in a great position. Your leadership, the city council's engagement, I think it's the stars are aligned. So I'm really excited about what's going to happen in the next year.
Wonderful.
Well, Deb, I'm very appreciative of the work that you have done on this. I was a little confused with the process because we've talked about all these issues for the last couple of years, and we came last month to approving the housing needs analysis report, and I thought, we haven't done our community engagement. How can we approve this report without all that work that we said we were going to do? And I didn't realize sort of the sequence of things and how it was going to work. So I'm glad that you have focused on what you have. Hearing from the people with the needs first, and that we will, blend this into this complicated process of looking at housing, and try to benefit from the experience of other communities, but to hear from the people that have chosen to be part of this community. I think one of the most significant statistics that we heard in the housing needs analysis report was the one that talked about whatever number of thousands of people it was who live in Gladstone but work somewhere else, and then a similar number of people who live somewhere else and work in Gladstone, and then there was something like 200 and something people who both live in Gladstone and work in Gladstone. And I've always thought, boy, if you live where you work, your transportation needs are so different, your housing needs, the walkable community is your own home, and it's where you spend most of your time. Boy, if we could just get to that place, take another 500 or so of those people and get them jobs here in Gladstone instead of commuting somewhere else. And all of this, it all kind of works together. And so we'll hear from residents, from stakeholders. I think you've identified a good broad range of people. You said, Jackie, we didn't really take any action on this tonight. You'll be sharing this with the council this coming weekend at their retreat. Do we need, other than thanking Deb profusely for the great work that you have done, is there anything else that we need to do as a council to accept this report?
Nope, I don't think so. There's no action, but we did want to give you an opportunity to review it and provide any ideas on if we missed any stakeholders. But no, this, again, the city council will be hearing briefly about it this weekend, but it will actually come to them February 23rd for more of a presentation that you have received tonight.
Okay. I passed along to commissioners last week something that I saw in the Sunday paper. They had an interview with the author of a book that I had recommended that talks about the change in some of the housing patterns across the country. And this report also notes multi-generational living and multi-generational families in single family homes as a changing trend in this country. So I think you are right up with all the trends and with the things that we need to hear from people. I know our family at one time lived in a single family home with 8 people from 3 generations. And we're trying to narrow that down a little now recently. And the goal is that eventually my wife and I will be empty nesters in a single family home. But we've had the experience, as Commissioner Pat Smith mentioned, you know, all of us who in our 20s or 30s rented and then, you know, were able to move on to owning homes. We know these transitions in life and the various options and the pros and cons of all of that. So I think we'll bring all that personal experience to this and be able to listen carefully to the community members with whom we engage. So thank you, Deb, for preparing us for this, for the time you've put into it. I always want to lift up the community members who were involved, particularly Liz Weiss and Randy Thomas, who were the 2 members of that original task force who stuck with it and kept coming to meetings where the whole task force was invited, and they were often the only 2 that really took that seriously and stayed involved. And I've always appreciated the input they brought to that. They were with that Abernethy group that organized when an apartment complex was being proposed in their neighborhood. And they have stayed very sensitive to these issues and found a good way to be involved. So I hope we'll find more folks like that in the community who really find that this is something that appeals to them. And if we end up forming a long-term permanent citizen advisory committee to look at housing needs in this community, I think there are people out there who will give that some real good attention and you know, provide our city council with some good background on this issue. So Deb, I can excuse you from the rest of the meeting. Thank you for coming, for presenting your report, and we will move on to our next agenda item.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Chair Milch,
Yes.
you had mentioned something at the beginning of the meeting about reviewing the planning actions from Joyfields.
Yeah, let's go back to that. That's a good idea.
I just didn't want to forget it.
That's right. There wasn't a lot in the month of December. You can see it in your agenda. No customer service counter contacts, 49 phone and email contacts, 4 building permits with land use review, and 1 administrative decision. She came to our planning commission meeting. She references an administrative permit, but I don't know exactly what that's for. And then she lists some building permits with land use review, 1 interior remodel, some revised plans for a rear awning on a building. I assume it's a residential building, 1 new single family home, and 1 new ADU. So we can get some details from Joy directly next month, but that is part of the agenda, and we'll make sure that it's reflected in, excuse me, it's out there for the public to be able to see. Okay, let's move ahead then. The next thing that we usually do at our first meeting is to look at our a work plan for the coming year. In your agenda packet tonight, on page 4-1 is a summary of what we started with last year. And again, I've said this before, you recall this was we did that at our last meeting just before COVID hit, and we stopped meeting, and I think we had intended to put more meat on the bones of these basic ideas. One of the things we sometimes do is kind of give ourselves a score on a scale of 1 to 5 of how well we did on a certain goal that we had. So one was accessory dwelling unit ADU code requirements. Obviously, we didn't come up with any final recommendations, but I'd be interested in hearing from you what you thought about the conversations that we had on this and the directions we were heading.
Yeah, I feel like in our conversations we had, we did a good job of identifying some of the issues people saw with what our current code allows, and I think you know we did a little research to see what other communities are allowing, and so I feel like we've created a pretty strong foundation for decision making moving forward, along with the information that came down from new legislation.
All right, that's helpful. I think it was good that we heard from some citizens some homeowners who wanted to do ADUs. That sort of called attention to the fact that the 400 square foot maximum was probably not going to work for very many people. So we'll be looking at that.
They have to be real small people.
Yes.
Well, an elected official made a comment in a meeting, 400 square feet. Oh, that's pretty big. But, compared to other cities, it really isn't. And,
Yeah.
And if you have to divide up your basement into 2 spaces to keep the ADU at 400 square feet, that's not going to work either. So I think the language that we saw from Oregon City, I think it was, that had an 800-foot minimum, but it also said you could do the full basement. And we recommended, I think we were saying maybe full attic too, if that's where you wanted to do it. That made much more sense to us.
Yeah.
The housing code audit, that's an ongoing, continuing thing, and that's part of what we talked about tonight. So we'll certainly continue to work on that, and we have our work cut out for us. We'll look to staff, Jackie, to assign us whatever our portion of that is. I'm glad we don't have to be the ones to conduct the engagement process. I wouldn't know where to begin with that. And we'll try to stay off social media. We'll come up with some more effective ways of doing that. Now, let's see. Additional topics that we identified last year, transportation, parking management strategies. As Commissioner Natalie Smith brought up tonight, this is always the thing that is kind of the elephant in the room on any projects we talk about, is the impact on parking. I had a meeting today with Jackie and with Mitzi Olson, who's the library director for the 2 Clackamas County libraries, the one in Gladstone and the one in the Oak Lodge community. And we were recommending the formation of a new advisory committee that would look at issues directly and peripherally related to access in the community, particularly access to information through a library, but also, if we're going to build a library, and we approved a while back the idea of having that library built without on-site parking, somewhere in the city, somebody's going to have to make a decision about where people can park to use the library. Is the existing library building going to be torn down and that land become a parking lot for the downtown community? Are we going to change the configuration of parking? Are we going to begin to have time limits on parking spaces that are enforced by our law enforcement? Some of those issues of management and design and configuration of parking will have to be dealt with by someone in the community. Code changes involving parking minimums would be under the purview of the Planning Commission, but parking management, I don't see that as our job necessarily, but I think the city will need to begin to take a look at this and see it in the context of all the other development and plans that are going on. Jackie, how have you found that to work? Have you had experience with that in other cities where there's been, you know, where they've taken on parking management as a process that required some, you know, not just the ongoing thing, but having to take a serious look and make changes in it?
Yeah, the experience that I've had is in the Old Town area, which was also part of the Urban Renewal District. And I think a lot of what we're going to be revisiting this next year in the Downtown Revitalization Plan is what are we going to do about the parking code requirements? But there's also some things that we can do administratively, like we could enforce the parking downtown. And so I think if the Planning Commission had some recommendations on that, that would be helpful to have that guidance. But this is also something that potentially, if the City Council does create that new local access advisory group, could also provide some input on the parking and the management strategies. So it's really going to be a combination of, should we be enforcing our parking in the downtown area? That would take code enforcement to get involved with that, which is fine if that's the direction that we want to go. But we'll also have to consider, is there any Planning Commission code changes for the zoning too, as we look ahead to this next year?
Okay, so parking management could end up being one of the goals that the City Council would have for itself. And to the extent that it involved any legislative changes, code changes, it would come under the Planning Commission for at least the first stage of public hearings and approvals and recommendation to the council.
Correct.
So we'll have to kind of work together on that. But that continues to be important to many folks. And I mentioned, I think the last meeting, with the defeat of the Metro Transportation Bill, it does have an impact on some of the things we were planning to do. The Downtown Revitalization Plan involved a lot of streetscape changes that were going to cost in the $10 to $12 million range, I think, involving tearing out streets and doing some things. And we were looking to Metro to provide some of that funding from that bill. Well, that bill was defeated. That money will not be there in the short term for that. And that also was going to be a source of money perhaps for the proposed replacement bridge, the trolley trail bridge. So the city will need to rethink downtown. You know, are we going to try to widen the sidewalks? Are we going to continue to use the parklet format that we see sometimes I see it in Portland around restaurants? We allowed it in Gladstone, but it never really took off here. You know, all these things kind of work together, and sometimes you get something that happens that kind of changes the whole game plan, and that the voters express themselves clearly on the Metro Transportation package, and we'll have to see whether how that affects our priorities locally. One of the goals last year that was important to Commissioner Malachi was taking a look at the parts of our code that has to do with energy efficiency in housing and in other buildings. Just because the age of our code, we haven't really kept up with some of the technical changes that are there. And he indicated through some research he did with us back in June that similar to the code changes regarding housing, that there are also things that come out from the state legislature that will be requirements of our code in the future. So I think we can wait for some guidance from state legislators on that as well, and see how we try to incorporate those. Because if we're looking at housing, if there are rules for various aspects of insulation and site placement and energy use, those will need to be a part of our code as well. And maybe we can incorporate that into the other code changes that we make. I've always felt like the basic goals of our comprehensive plan are as good now as they were 40 years ago. It's just the specifics have changed because life has changed a lot in the last 40 years.
Yeah.
So we'll look at whether we ever have a residential zone that allows smaller lots than the current 5,000 square foot minimum, whether we will have ways of doing some of those missing middle multifamily homes in residential neighborhoods, and what part of the neighborhoods they will be allowed, and are we permitted to restrict them from some parts of the neighborhood. That's all part of this community engagement process. We want to hear from people and find out what we can and can't do and what would be the best way to do that in Gladstone. Jackie, I have one more question for you. You mentioned in one of your recent weekly reports a reference to, and now I can't remember the term for it, but it's those areas just to the north of the city limits for which we have an agreement with the county that goes back to 1986, identifying areas where it's thought that if Gladstone were ever to enlarge through new annexation, those are likely the areas that we would move to. So when we do projects that border on that area, I think we're required to consult with the county a little bit and let them know, because the citizens who live there have some interest, a dual interest area, I think it's what it's called.
It's called an UGMA, which is the Urban Growth Management Area. And so Gladstone has an UGMA agreement with Clackamas County, and you're correct that those are properties that are in the UGMA. We would have to coordinate with Clackamas County in order for any type of annexation or future growth to be planned there.
Some people, I hear, residents of Gladstone sometimes comment, when we built a new police station, they said, oh, we built a building that's much bigger than what this city needs. And, we have a much bigger police staff than a community this size needs. And why do we build it way at the north end of town? And one of the answers could be that that maybe somewhere in the future, that won't be the northernmost end of Gladstone. If we ever were to annex that area and enlarge our city, our police station would be more centrally located to a new, larger Gladstone. So it's those kinds of issues where you think about it in terms of the possible way the city will look 20 years down the line. That goes into planning. It's hard to think of these issues so far in the future. It seems really distant to me, but that's the way we sometimes have to think about them. Commissioner Langston, did you have a comment on that?
Oh no, I just agree with that. I guess just looking at our agenda, are we looking to fill in item number 3 on our objectives, or are we, what are we hoping to get out of this process at the moment?
Well,
we can fill it in with other new items if you have some. So if there's an area that you've thought about that you'd like to see us spend some time on in 2021, we certainly want to hear about those.
We're still talking about our work plan, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah. Did you have
Okay.
something in mind?
Well, I think you, go ahead, Langston.
Nope, I didn't have anything. You're up. Go ahead.
Okay.
I think we might have missed the first one there under additional topics about implementation of process improvement for our meetings.
Oh, okay. Yes, I didn't mention that one, did I?
No.
Yeah, we talked about that right at the start, and then we got into having these meetings online all the time, and it became a little difficult to change the process. But
Yep.
yeah, we can continue to do that. We haven't had the level of community involvement that we might have if we were still meeting in City Hall.
Right.
And at the same time, I was talking about this with Jackie and Mitzi today. In some ways, these Zoom meetings are more accessible to many in the community. And then if people don't have access to good internet service, there's less accessibility. And
Right.
so are there other aspects of that that we should be looking at?
I was just thinking about fine tuning, how we conduct our meetings, how we address certain issues. I was at an LDAC meeting last month that was online, and they have it, the county, Clackamas County has it quite structured. Because it's the Library District Advisory Committee, and the chair said, this is the outline of how we're going to conduct this meeting. It's only going to be an hour long. We are going to take 1 5-minute break because, it's like by the time some of these people, library directors and other people, get to this meeting, they've been Zooming all day. And so they have a very defined process of how they conduct the Zoom meetings. And I was like, yeah, we need to look at some of those that would help us. When we have land use issues or a public hearing, we don't have any control over the length of the meeting and, if it draws out longer based on testimony and whatnot. But I think we have room for improvement.
Yeah, we've gotten some good guidance from our city attorney on conducting these meetings virtually. We've gotten a new script, and that's been helpful. As you say, those of you with many more experiences on the Planning Commission than I have can remember the years when there were meetings that went well into the evening because of a lot of public comment.
Mhm.
I hear from Commissioner Mercer or Councilor Mercero, Councilor Reisner reflecting on their time on the Planning Commission when they had these very late night meetings on controversial issues. So I know there are times when that's how it goes. We can try to structure them in a way that, again, has limited time limits for people so that they don't go long. But I think, as Deb pointed out tonight, getting that community involvement is, that's at the core of planning. We can't be cutting people off. We have to invite and include and involve as many people as we can.
And I wasn't saying anything like that in the sense that it's we serve at the pleasure of the citizens in order to be their representative. So we need to hear their input and what they have to say.
That's right.
So
That's right.
So maybe if I'm understanding correctly, Commissioner Smith, would you like to add implementation of process of improvement as your number 3 on your work plan?
What does everybody else think? I would vote for that, but what does everybody else think?
Yeah, I agree. If we can streamline or format our meetings in such to be the most efficient and also include involvement with everybody, I'm game with that.
Okay.
I would be in agreement also.
Good. All right. Let's add that as number 3 then. I don't know that we will have a lot of direct responsibility for the community engagement work that Deb described tonight, but our other things we can certainly be open to ways of improving. Somebody made a comment, I noticed at the city council last month, that we would not be having a city council liaison to the planning commission this year for the reason that was given was that the planning commission meetings were quasi-judicial hearings, and therefore it was not appropriate for a city council member to be present. But it's been I think this past year it was about 50-50 which of our meetings had quasi-judicial land use hearings and which meetings involved legislative matters where it would be appropriate for a city council member to be present. So I'm sorry, it looks like we won't have a liaison, but we will try to be sure that we are open to sharing with the city council any information that we have that it would be helpful for them to hear from meetings that we have on legislative matters and policy matters that don't involve specific land use applications.
But thank goodness we always have Jackie.
Yes, staff is here. Tammy is faithfully involved too, and behind the scenes, she helps me a great deal at City Hall and gives a good feedback from there. And so our staff is very important to us.
Definitely.
All right. Well, I think, does anyone else have another issue that you'd like to add to planning goals for this year? We didn't exactly word how we would do the parking management, but I think the planning commission's goal in that would be to help with any code changes, and the management part, we'll let the city council take a look at that in terms of their own goal setting for the year. And they can involve us in whatever way they feel would be appropriate.
I also think that if we have the time, we might want to look at some other cities to see what they have come up with. Oregon City being one that has a very small downtown and very limited parking, and their courthouse is in downtown. I wonder how they handle theirs.
You guys seen what they did over there on 10th Street? The back-end parking, back-end angle parking.
Oh yeah, that's getting a lot of attention on social media.
Yeah. What are people liking it?
No,
yeah,
gotten some negative. It's funny. They have the it's over on that Willamette. What's it called?
Willamette Drive.
Yeah.
Willamette Drive, and yes, it's diagonal parking, but they said that if you back into the spaces, then it's much easier to get out of the spaces. You can see the cars behind you.
Yeah.
But people say backing in is too difficult. And then people say online, well, if you can't back in, then how would you be able to back out if they had regular angled parking? So it goes back and forth.
You're talking over in West Lynn, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I was designated a lead on a social media platform where these discussions go on, and people keep saying, oh, we've talked about this. We've talked this to death. Please don't let people post about this anymore. But it stirred up a lot of interest among the people that go over there. It's a nice area, a nice walkable area with restaurants and other things. And that was a change that didn't meet with a lot of satisfaction. So we can look forward to those kinds of things when we start talking about our own downtown.
Yeah, that's what
I know that I have personal feelings about where diagonal parking would work best in our community based on street widths and need for bicycle transportation and other things. But, you know, that's an area where we want to hear from everybody and make sure that we do it right.
Yeah. So maybe it's worth, you know, having that on the list to just do a little bit of research and see what options are out there.
I think I did send you all a packet, a PDF of a document on parking management strategies that came from the state.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be useful to us, or it could be useful as a resource to whatever group of citizens is assigned this task.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll keep that in mind as well.
Perfect.
All right. I think we are kind of at the end of what we had for tonight. It wasn't too much, and it's exciting to know that we're moving in the right direction on some very complicated issues that all sort of intersect with one another. And I'd like to think that a year or so from now, we'll be a lot farther along with those. And I'm grateful to the city staff, Jackie and John both, and to the great people, the great consultants who are able to engage in these processes. You know, we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. We've got people who really know what they're doing and can bring their skills and abilities to us and the benefit of their experience. So I'm grateful for that. All right. Any other business from commissioners? Commissioner Langston, anything else you have for us tonight?
I don't have anything new tonight. Thank you.
All right. And how is your family enjoying your new home?
Oh, we're loving it. It was great. The holidays were nice. Being home with COVID has been great. So it's going grow. Thank you for asking.
Being home with COVID, you mean being home during the COVID experience, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay,
yeah,
good. I want to be sure there's nobody in your family that's had health issues.
All healthy.
All right. Commissioner Natalie Smith?
I do not have anything to share tonight.
All right. Commissioner Pat Smith?
I have a question as long as Jackie's still with us. It seems to me I saw something on here about future planning commission members. And I know at the city council meeting it got set aside for interviews. I'm wondering about the ethics of lobbying the city council on people we would like to see. Yay or nay?
I think you as an individual have the right to let your elected officials know your preference. I was going to update you just to let you know that there were 6 applications for the 2 positions. At the last city council meeting, one of them withdrew because of potential conflict with the city councilor. So you currently have 5 applications for 2 positions. And the city council came to a consensus that because you have more applicants than positions, they would like those applicants to submit a 1 to 2 minute video telling us a little bit more about themselves and why they would like to be on the Planning Commission. The City Council will receive those individually. They will not be posted online. And then February 9th City Council meeting, they will discuss appointments. I think in the meantime, though, Commissioner Smith, it's community outreach. And again, if you want to talk to the elected officials about your thoughts on that, I think that's appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
I think all the applications were in the city council packet for last week's meeting. And Riley Hartman, who's the husband of Councilor Nessa Hartman, is the one who withdrew his application.
Correct.
So they didn't want a spouse of a city councilor serving on the planning commission. But you can review the other 5 applicants and share your thoughts as a citizen and as a commissioner. I'm sure that I appreciate it.
I did review those applications and I noticed that there were 2 other applicants that lived in the same residence. And I don't know how we're going to be handling that.
The ordinance governing our committees, commissions, and boards allows for 2 people in the same residence to be on the same committee.
Okay, as long as they're not married.
It doesn't matter if they're married or not.
Oh, I thought that was changed.
It was changed to allow for it. It used to be that we didn't allow for it, and it was actually amended to allow for it. And the basic reason given for that was because Gladstone is such a small community, it may be difficult to get volunteers if we don't allow people from the same household to participate.
I had that backwards, I'm sorry.
Does that mean they'll have to email their dinner conversation if discuss business?
That's the difficulty with some of those rules. As long as they don't invite a 3rd member of the or a 3rd and 4th members of the planning commission over with them, I guess they'll be okay. Yeah, we have to keep all those rules in mind.
Thank you very much for the update, Jackie.
And I do have one other question in relationship to a council liaison. We had City Councilor Mercer this past year, and he was there simply as an observer. I'm unaware of him ever making any attempt to say anything during one of the meetings. And I felt it gives the council some sense of what it is we do. I may be off base on that, but I would hope that we would have a liaison, not one who wants to participate in the process, obviously, but kind of someone who just sits there, or at least comes once in a while, just to see what it is we do.
I'd have to agree with Commissioner Smith. I You can laugh if you want, but it was like a sense of comfort knowing that whatever was transpiring during our meetings was going to be shared at the next city councilor meeting. So everybody was up to date and up to speed as to what we were working on and what's going on the planning commission. I think it's a good thing, maybe if not every meeting, and especially if there's public hearings, but I thought it was a good thing.
As the year went on, we had several meetings of our own that were that the council was going to be involved with later on legislative matters, where they were present and listening to us. They can always watch our meetings and attend them
That's
individually, but having one person there who will take things back and keep the rest of the council informed makes their jobs a little easier for them. I think Mayor Stemple, when she was talking about appointments to liaisons to citizen advisory committees, was concerned about the amount of time that that counselors would have to put in. We have people on the council with young children now, and you know, your time is limited, especially with school responsibilities and other things in these times of COVID. So I think her concerns were out of a real genuine concern for time limitations of volunteers in the community. I know I enjoyed serving as the liaison to the council when I had that opportunity, and it was always good to have a council member there. And as I say, I think the mayor was mistaken in making the generalization that all our meetings are quasi-judicial hearings. They are not. And so I would certainly be open to having a liaison here for those meetings where it's appropriate to be involved and stay in. So I don't have any other business for the council tonight, for the commission. I've been making this mistake since I first joined, getting council and commission mixed up all the time. Les Poole pointed out to me once. I hope Les is okay. We didn't see him tonight. Anyway, I thank you all. I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn our planning commission meeting.
All right, it has been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Oh, good. Well, boy,
Let's go.
nobody
Arm
seconded,
wrestle.
we'd have to do it all night. All right. I will give that one to Commissioner Langston for seconding the motion to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Good night. Thank you all. We are adjourned at 7:52 p.m.